Very good. I
Um,
received my warning that you're recording.
and I'll just have everyone mute, please, but then unmute when you have a question or are chiming in. And please don't be offended if during the talk I go ahead and mute everybody, just so it keeps it more clear.
Thank you.
Oh.
And please do ask questions, because I'll just go otherwise. So, okay. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejas Vinavadi Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Below Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki Jai, for all the saints and sages of all the traditions. Jai. And so we ask for the grace, and I'm sure receive. Okay, so this is part 2 of the Raja Yoga Sutras essence of, and we'll do a little recap, just a little bit, and then continue on, primarily in book 2. And first, as recap, I'll remind that there are 4 books. And in English, 4 books or 4 portions. The Sanskrit word is pada, which is really meaning more like portion. But normally, in normal parlance, it would be said to be 4 books that comprise Raja Yoga Sutras. And Raja Yoga Sutras, again, science of yoga, and really of all of the 4 paths. They're all the science of yoga, and what we understand is that any one of the 4 are the 4. It sounds like a very funny thing to say, but we, in any of the 4 paths, that being bhakti, the yoga of the heart, coming into union through converting emotion to devotion, karma yoga, the yoga of the hand, where we convert the motive from self-centered motive to selfless motive, or instead of doing for me, doing for God. And then jnana yoga, which is the inquiry, self-inquiry, inquiry into the nature of self, often called Vedanta as well. So beginning with the question, who am I? And practicing neti, or the not this, not that. The answer, of course, to the question, who am I, is an answer that has to be discovered within us, within and without. It's not an intellectual answer. It's not just a saying, I am that, even though that's a practice of jnana yoga. And neti is the not this, not that, which is really the way of jnana yoga, realizing that whatever I've taken myself to be, in fact, I'm not this. And so the peeling of the onion, as it were. And then Raja Yoga, Raja translating to royal path, which is really more along the lines of what people in the West think of as yoga. But much deeper. The common idea of yoga and practice of yoga is really very far off the mark. And even with Raja Yoga, as we look at the sutras, we see that the idea we've had of yoga is really just an idea, and the study of these sutras, including Raja Yoga Sutras, helps us to develop a deeper understanding. But once again, the answer is really inside. And so all of these are existing in order to help us to get to the capital S self, or get to Ishvara, is the term that's used here in Raja Yoga. So the 4 books, or the 4 padas, portions of Raja Yoga, this great science of yoga, The first is contemplation, which often we'll say is the theory of Raja Yoga, as it were. But really it's the contemplation or the role of concentration in freedom or yoga. And then the second is the portion on practice. The third is accomplishments, and the fourth is absoluteness. And in this session, second session, we're really focusing primarily on practice, the book on practice, but we'll see once again that we continue with discussion of the concepts as we go into the practice. So that's that part. We want to come back to a concept, and I said yesterday or this morning, one or the other, that I had a dream, or I experienced a dream last night about this vritti. And what is vritti? And what is thought? And what is the relationship between thought and vritti? We want to come back to where we began the actual text itself. And the first two sutras within the entirety of Raja Yoga Sutras, it begins with, in English, now yoga is explained. And then this famous Sanskrit verse, yogas chitta vritti nirodha, which here gets translated by Swami Vivekananda as yoga is the restraining of the mind stuff from taking various forms. And so vritti, he's giving the English words taking of various forms is vritti. And so the other, and we said this when we had our session 2 weeks ago, we said that vritti, the direct translation or a direct translation is actually whirlpool. And we talked a little bit about tornadoes and hurricanes and all of this. A whirlpool, something that's drawing us in or sucking us in. And it's really a good definition to work with. Commonly, when we talk about Raja Yoga, the teaching of Raja Yoga, people will hear that yoga is the stoppage of thoughts, but it's not that. Thoughts are like clouds. They exist, and within this universe is made of thought. The entire universe is constructed of thought. Thoughts underlie this entire universe, and in fact, we don't really know what this outer world is. We just know something about an inner world, and the inner world is made up of thoughts. We say my thoughts, but it's really my relationship with thoughts. In fact, if we understood this, if we understood that the act of seeing, so right now I am looking at the phone, this iPhone, and I see an image that I call Gayatri. And then if Saraswati or Michael say something, I will see their image. This wonderful Zoom will do that. I'll see them. And arising in the mind, within the mind, is the name Gayatri or Saraswati or Michael or Naringa or Carrie. Except if you actually stop for a moment and realize that as I look, the act of seeing involves I. It's true, we discuss more today. And it involves the act of seeing, and it involves an object that's being seen. But really the object being seen, what this physical eye is seeing, is light. It's not more and not less than light. Saraswati, you hear that, right? So now we can say shades of light. It's fine. but really it's simply light. Different colors of light, fine, but still it's light. All of the other words are descriptors of it. But according to how that light hits this receptor, and then the receptor coming to the optic nerve, and the optic nerve converting that light form to data that's interpreted by the mind, only when the mind is interpreting the form of light does the name Gayatri or Saraswati or Naringa or any of these names arise. It's only then. It's not before then. Now, in my delusion, in my confusion, I might walk around saying, I'm Swami, call me Swami. I might say that. That's delusionary. And what I'm doing is I'm playing a game when I say that, because what you're seeing when you see this is the same. It's a light show. And in your mind exists the name Swami or any of the other names. And of course, what happens, what we generally experience, is that through this act of seeing, the name arises, Gayatri or whatever, and then along with the name Gayatri is a story. And it might include when we met, and it might include some idea about you or a set of ideas about you. And it can be a very, very long set. And it might start with woman or man or young or old or, oh my God, so many qualifiers. Well, this is the vritti. All of this is the vritti. I want to share a little story, and Gayatri, I think you're familiar with this. I don't know. Carrie might not have heard it, and Naringa, I think, has heard it. I don't know about Saraswati and Michael, so I'll tell a little story, and we'll talk about vritti and what is vritti here. Let's assume that you live in a city. So this is participation. You have to imagine this. Let's assume that you live in a city, and every day you walk to work. You walk to work in the morning. You walk back in the evening, and the route that you walk is known to you. And so, and let's say you walk 20 minutes or something like that each way. As you walk, you're seeing objects, and those objects are also forms of light. You see shops, storefronts, you might see people along the way. Maybe you even see the same people along the way. And then you see the street lights, and you see the signs, and then you see the office. It's all fine. This is practical knowledge. You get to the office and you work, and then you turn around and you come back. Let's say that many of the storefronts that you're walking past are empty, and one day some activity begins in the storefront, and it's open, and there are lights on inside, and there are workers inside. I'm going to put you on the spot. Saraswati or Michael, either one of you can unmute, and if you'll answer this question, please. When you see that, when you see the activity in there and you see someone inside, what happens in the mind?
I question what's going on.
Okay, now you just used I, and I'm going to correct that if you don't mind. I'm going to say a question arises in the mind. Who are they? Is that correct?
What's going on?
Okay, now that's a question that arises in the mind, isn't it? It's a thought.
Yes.
You recognize here as we talk that it's a thought, correct?
Yes.
Okay. then what happens?
I am curious, and I know that it isn't what it used to be, but I don't know what it is.
Okay, very good. So within the mind stuff now, there's a curiosity about it. There's a comparison to what was before, yes,
Yes,
and there's an interest in understanding what the change is and what's causing the change.
yes,
And by the way, there's an interest in whether the result of it might be pleasurable or painful.
yes.
Okay, very good. Very good. So I'm going to keep telling the story. Now, day by day, and by the way, what you see is that these thoughts about that they're likely to arise for you again that day. You're working and they're likely to arise again. Yeah. And as you're contemplating that walk back home, they're likely to arise again. Yes. Okay. So that's the way of the mind. And then now we walk back home and we look and we see more activity and play it forward. Over a period of time, there's more and more activity and the same thing's happening. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So look and see. And I'm going to fast forward. I'm just going to go to close to the end and I'm going to say, all right, now I just saw a Sherry's comment. And so now we played it out, and over the period of time, a few months, whatever it is, we discovered that first there were ovens coming in, and then we had to deal with the thought maybe it's a restaurant, maybe it's a bakery, all of this stuff. And then eventually we see a sign that goes up and the sign says La Patisserie French Bakery. And there's that aha, that satisfaction within the mind that, now I know what it is. And they put up a sign that says, tomorrow morning we're opening. And for our opening day, 1 French pastry free for every person that comes. And so, and of course, that day, did we sleep very much the night before? Maybe not.
I
Because
would
the
not
thought,
lose sleep over a French pastry.
yeah, well, so how about an election, my dear?
Yes.
Okay, it's not different. That's the point.
Oh, okay.
What we're talking about is what is a vritti. We're defining a vritti. Okay. So, and then we have it, and then if you play it out, oh my God, we just loved that croissant, whatever it was. And what is the thought of that doing during that first day in the office? What did it do the night before? What does it do? Do we stop again? And do we stop every day after it's there? And what happens when they close? And now we have the addiction. And somewhere along the way, we now have a new $20 a day habit. And we had to threaten our boss to quit if we didn't get enough money, because now we don't have enough money anymore. And so if we say the goal of life is peace, and we say the goal of yoga, what is yoga? Yoga is union with one's own highest self. And I'll read. At that time, the seer, Purusha, the I, the time when there is the cessation of the vrittis, rests in his own or her own unmodified state, at peace, Satchidananda, without disturbance. And yoga says the goal is to get to that place. And at other times, that is when not concentrating, and this is the 4th sutra, the seer is identified with the modifications. And these modifications are the vritti. And you see, it's all of this mental activity is not thought, because the thought can arise. It's the whole process of identification with the thought, and then all of the ragadvesha, the hope for pleasure in the future, the attraction towards that which is pleasant, the outcome in the election, which would be pleasant, the aversion to the pain, yes, and then that mental function, which is focused around this, all of that is called vritti. And so yoga is not then the cessation of thought per se. It is the cessation of the life where we are unable to touch the highest, to experience the highest, to reside in and remain in the highest state of life, freedom, which also is called samadhi here, because of this whole process that's playing out, which is sucking us in to what? Ultimately, it's sucking us into pain. Is it so?
May I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So in this state of cessation of vritti,
Yes.
what does this look like then when we walk past the bakery or the building with activity going on? What does it look like to observe without the vrittis?
Well, samadhi is of different types. And you're asking a question about what is samadhi like. And near the end of this first book, this first portion, and we'll just mention them briefly, are these different samadhis. So there's a question of what is the seer experiencing, the I, what am I experiencing in these different states? And the answer will be anything from non-identification, still seeing an object, such as a shop, such as an oven, but not being wrapped up in it, not being subject to addiction with it, able to experience pleasure or pain, either one, without the aversion or avoidance of pain, and without feeling attracted to what's pleasant. So, and people will ask sometimes, and then in the highest samadhi, nirvikalpa samadhi, God seeing God.
Mm.
There's no croissant here. There's no storefront here. Now, is the appearance of the storefront still there? Well, yeah, the appearance of storefront is in the mind, but the name storefront is only in the personal mind. Does that make any sense? There's universal mind. So just like the cloud will go by in the sky, the naming of the cloud and all the stuff about the cloud and all the ideas about whether it's going to rain or not, and will I be happy if it rains or will I be unhappy because of the rain, all of that stuff is just in the quote unquote personal mind. When all of that activity has ceased, is the cloud still there? Is the cloud still seen? Well, that's a good question. If the name cloud does not arise, is the cloud seen? Who would like to answer that question?
Yes, it is.
What you're calling a cloud, what the mind is calling a cloud, is still seen in the lower levels of samadhi.
Mm.
In the nirvikalpa samadhi, what you call a cloud, what that mind is calling a cloud, not seen.
So what it comes down to is what I'm hearing here, the ability to observe without the questions and the vrittis comes down to the cessation of desire.
So now we get to how to get there, which is the entirety of the teaching. It's really the cessation of the I-ness. I, me, mine. It's the stoppage of this. Naringa, you have a question.
I do. So if I understand correctly, the vrittis and everything else, if those questions arise in our minds of what is this, am I gonna like it and stuff like that, isn't the purpose of yoga of just being in the present? Because if we're in the present, we're not asking about the future.
So seeing what's really there, we can say is the purpose, or seeing what's really here. But really it is this shloka number 3. At that time, when there is concentration in the mind, and the mind is seeing deeply light, or what is the light, who is the light, without names, then the I is resting in the unmodified state, which means the peak state or super consciousness. Or we can say happiness or fullness. So the cessation of modifications means the experience of fullness. Only when the modifications are here in the personal mind is there anything other than fullness, other than the experience of fullness. And that is boga. And the term boga gets used now and then. Union with objects is disturbance or pain. Union with capital S self, or the absolute, is the cessation of pain. This is really what science of yoga, or any of the practices of yoga, are about, is stopping the pain, stopping the suffering, ending the suffering. And what is the cause of suffering? We can say desire is not really desire. It's delusion, ignorance. It's taking myself to be this. This is the cause of suffering. And desire is a factor coming from taking myself to be this.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the end of avidya is the goal of yoga. Okay, so yes, and then we're going to continue because we're going to step through, but this is very helpful at the beginning.
Okay.
Please.
I'll hold. Okay.
Okay.
I'll hold. Let's go through.
No, I'll go for it, because I'm going to flip while you're doing that. I'm going to get to where we're going.
I'm just wondering here. Is it desire that makes the I, me, mine arise? Or does
No, ignorance. Ignorance makes the I, me, mine arise, and desire and everything else. Avidya is the center of it all. Just illusion. That's all. That's all that has to be cleared. It's said in Jnana Yoga, just quickly, this, that Maya, which is of the absolute, that Maya has two qualities. It is the first quality is the projection, or the appearance of a world, and the second quality is delusion, which is taking myself to be this. And the first is said to be endless. In other words, the show continues. But the second is said to have an end, that it's possible through yoga or through evolution to finally identify with the light, or the self, or the absolute, which is who we are, instead of identifying with the person or the mask. And that this is the end of the individual, and it's also the end of suffering. So this science of yoga, Raja Yoga, is going after exactly the same. The goal is not different.
Is there a question of degree here at all? Is the difference between addiction and want up for discussion, or is it simply one state?
Well, if you see where it goes, then you'll see want is a predecessor to addiction. And aversion to not want is a predecessor to addiction. And so you would nip it in the bud there. Or you would want freedom, and you would know what you want to be free of, which is delusion. Again, the goal, we say, well, I just want this because all I want is to be happy. That's fine. That's perfectly good. But that's coming from delusion, because if we really realize that I already am what I seek, then we would truly say, whatever comes in the way of me recognizing what I seek is an obstacle, and I wish to be free of the obstacle. And then someone will say, well, don't you love me? Why don't you love me? That wouldn't be a question, because if I saw you clearly, I would see my own capital S self, I would see God, and there would be nothing but love. You wouldn't ask the question because you would feel love flowing towards you in a way that you wouldn't have a doubt about it. And so the rest of this discussion is a discussion occurring within the state of delusion. And yoga is wanting to help us to end the delusion.
I understand.
And it's hard to catch it, because all the stuff that we want, I realized one day years ago, before this yoga journey, and these words came. I said to myself, who said this? Well, I think I did. I think the real I said something like this. All I want is to be happy. And realizing that changed the flow of life, because that allowed me to accept what actually provided happiness over what was actually providing pain. And that cleared the way, as it were. So if we can get back to that place where we realize, wait, all I want is to be happy, and I don't really care then how it comes, and I accept that I didn't know where it was.
Right.
Right. And I had an experience of happiness, and I also had an experience of its opposite. And it seems like they always come together somehow. and I would be perfectly fine to end this cycle. Then that way makes one ready for yoga. Okay. So now also in the first pada is this. These vrittis, how are they controlled? Practice and non-attachment. And I'm just going to continue. I'm going to read a few of the sutras, and it explains these. Continuous struggle to keep them perfectly restrained is practice. So struggling in order to keep the vrittis from taking me over is what's called practice. And the more we see the goal and have some understanding that it's possible to be happy, it's possible to recognize it, it's possible to achieve satisfaction and to reside in the place, then that helps us to be more motivated. Are we still here? Okay, cool. So that's that part. And then 15, the subjugation for the thirst for objects seen or heard of is non-attachment. So I'll say the thirst for what I quote unquote love, if I subjugate that thirst, if I remind myself, wait a second, that only leads to pain, and I practice drawing back, that's actually non-attachment. So it defines the two. We could say also a practice, but the two practices are, let me work on my mind and how my mind works. That's first. Let me step back from all of this. That's non-attachment. We'll continue. And we're going to step into the second portion here very shortly. It's speaking of samadhi, and samadhi being the goal. There are these three words, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, that are really fruit. They're referring to states of concentration of mind. First, there's a theory put forward, and it's a theory. We ourselves can discover whether it's a law or a truth or not, but that's something we as individuals, supposed individuals, have to discover for ourselves. The theory put forward is that when the mind is concentrated and the state of vritti is ended, then one experiences what was sought, the satisfaction. Then what we're saying is that satisfaction is achieved through concentration of the mind. That's the theory. And the concentration of the mind, there are three words applying. Dharana is concentration from moment. And we all have this experience, because I remember Michael saying, I get that riding my riding lawnmower. And Michael, I share this story often because that's an experience of dharana, or concentration. It's the cessation of the vrittis. In other words, there's nothing else drawing you out at that point. There's no idea of where I should be instead. There's no preferred, there's no thinking about or considering what I need or want or what I need to avoid. There's just an experience of the highest, and the experience of the highest is allowed because the mind has become concentrated, and that's dharana. Does that make sense? So dharana is the first concentration. Dhyana is what we call meditation, which is where we can reach this state of concentration on demand through practice, and it stays for some time, but it still gets interrupted. And samadhi is where the concentration is not interrupted. And as we said, there are different levels of samadhi. We're not going to explore these today, but there are different levels of samadhi, resulting in finally the highest level, which is really the cessation of any modifications. But when the mind is able to stay concentrated, then this is called samadhi. And here the text talks a little bit about the different ideas of samadhi. And then it says this, which is just beautiful. It says number 24 in the first, Ishvara, 23, or this samadhi is obtained by devotion to Ishvara. Raja Yoga is normally seen as a godless teaching, but interestingly, Patanjali does insert God in it. And he says there's a shortcut. He says it right here. He says, or this samadhi is attained by devotion to Ishvara. Ishvara, the supreme ruler, is a special Purusha, untouched by misery actions and their results and desires. And we talked about before, Ishvara we can relate to as personal God, the way that we ourselves relate to the highest and connect with the highest, not just relate to, but find a connection to. In him becomes infinite that all-knowingness, which in others is only a germ. He is the teacher of even the ancient teachers, not being limited by time. So Patanjali says actually the teaching of yoga and all of the teachers of yoga, and sometimes people call me a teacher, and I'm very quick to correct. They say, no, I'm not the teacher. Ishvara is the teacher. When I'm successfully connected to Ishvara, then Ishvara is teaching you. I'm not. And so I say, I'm your friend, I'll help you to find Ishvara, like this. The word that, and this is in Raja Yoga Sutras, the word that manifests him, Ishvara, is Om. The repetition of this Om and meditating upon its meaning is the way to reach this samadhi through connection to Ishvara. What is that saying? It's saying repeating mantra, the name Om, which is also Om Namah Shivaya and Om Namo Narayanaya and Hari Om and all of these, or Amen, or mantra. When we are relating to it as the name of Ishvara, or a way to connect with Ishvara, it's given in Raja Yoga as a practice. I know that Gayatri, you get a kick out of this at this point, yes? That it's here. Are you there, dear? Gayatri?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. So, and he continues on the mantra for a moment. From that is gained introspection and the destruction of obstacles. And then a little more exploration. We're going to jump now, not jump, segue, step into the end of this first pada, and we're going to do a walkthrough of the second pada, the portion on practice. So the goal of yoga that's been established then is the cessation of the vrittis, which is the end of the I, me, mindness. The end of the delusion results in the end of the vrittis. And what it's established is that this is accomplished through practice and non-attachment. And the practices have been described, and we continue to describe the practices. And at the end of this first pada is some discussion about the different samadhis. We'll let you continue that on your own. Now, practice. We start pada 2 with the first sutra, also pretty famous, but most people don't love this one. And the first sutra of pada 2 says, accepting pain as help for purification, study of spiritual books, and surrender to the Supreme Being constitute yoga in practice. Now, yoga in practice is Kriya Yoga. There's this great yogi who came to the West in 1920-something teaching Kriya Yoga, and most people who practice Kriya Yoga don't know that it actually doesn't just mean that particular type of yoga in action. It's a broader term for the practice of yoga. Kriya Yoga means Kriya is action or practice. So it's what can I do in order to be free? Jnana yogis say freedom is about knowing. Raja yogis say, what can I do in order to be free? Which suits the Westerners. Because we are all about action. What can I do? In fact, we're so much about action that we generally don't care what Raja Yoga says. We just want to cut to the chase and get to the meditation part. But what we discover when we actually study Raja Yoga is that the meditation is what comes at the end. The practice has to come before that. And so here, practice is defined, and I'll give you the way, that's Swami Satchidananda. The way Swami Vivekananda says it is, mortification, study, and the surrender of the fruits of work to God are called Kriya Yoga, or this practice. I'll continue. Kriya Yoga, or practice, leads to samadhi and attenuates the pain-bearing obstructions. And the obstructions are pain-bearing. If we go back to the earlier part of the discussion, we see this vritti state. Can I call it vritti state? Where I am subservient to the objects, but I'm not subservient to the objects. I'm subservient to the ideas in the mind. about happiness coming from union with one type of object and disunion with a different type of object. Does that make sense? That's an idea in the mind, and that is born of delusion, and it results in the chasing after things, experiences, people, places, and the preference of one over another. And those are all called pain-bearing obstructions here. They're an obstruction to what? Gayatri, they're obstructing what?
Body.
Samadhi, peace, self-realization. They're obstructing satisfaction. They're obstructing freedom. And their nature is pain. Does that make sense? Because they always result in pain. As long as we're subject to things or experiences to get our happiness, then pain will always come. Now, we can say, I love life. And Saraswati, I come to this because I think of you and your father. We can say, I love life. And interestingly enough, the love of life without the particular notion of it has to come at me this way or that way, and oh my God, it can't come this way. The love of life without obstruction is natural. The obstructions are unnatural. The obstructions only exist in one's mind. They're all that is obstructing, and they're also all that is causing pain. Now, pain being suffering in this case. Physical pain is one thing. But I tell you, if we're not identified with the body, then it's hard to say that there's even an awareness of physical pain. I know that sounds crazy, and that seems like advanced class, but it's true. There's a process playing out, and the process is natural, and this body is subject to birth and growth and sustenance for some period of time, and then decay and death, and with the growth can come union with pleasure. With the decay comes union with pain, but they're just parts of a cycle that aren't about me. And they're not about me. They're about prakriti. They're about the play itself. So the pain-bearing obstructions are what? They're ignorance, avidya, egoity, the attachment, aversion, and clinging to life. And I'm going to read for a little bit and see now, based on our earlier discussion, if these just fit. I feel like they will. Ignorance is the productive field of all those that follow, whether they're dormant or attenuated, overpowered, or expanded. So anything that's causing us to go after is rooted in ignorance, or to avoid is rooted in ignorance. If we know that all is Ishvara, or all is Brahman, or all is self, then that's said to be the end of ignorance. And then ignorance is defined. Ignorance is to take what is non-eternal, impure, painful, and the not self for what is eternal, pure, happy, and the Atman, or self, respectively. So the hallmark of ignorance within us, and ignorance doesn't exist in the I, ignorance exists within the mind stuff. The hallmark of ignorance is to take myself to be separate, alone, incomplete, and in need, and by being incomplete, in need of something, but not just something, the right thing. That's the hallmark. All of that is arising only from ignorance. Egoity is the identification of the seer with the instrument of seeing. So I, which is said to be pure and unadorned, untainted, eternal, one without a second. When I say I am this or I am that, first, it's the mind that's saying it. That is egoism. So when and if you step back for a moment, what you see, and Saraswati, I mentioned this earlier, you said, I think this and I think that, and I feel this and I feel that. And I just lightly corrected you and I said, is it this? Or are you observing a thought and the thought is saying, I wonder about this. And the thought is the memory, that the way it was. And the thought is the questioning about what could it be. And the desire is the interest in what I would love for it to be. And the aversion is, oh my God, I hope it's not that, because I would hate that. But that's all thought. That doesn't have anything to do with I. I'm seeing it. But when I've identified with it, that's ego. That's what ego is doing. Attachment is that which, did you have a question, Gayatri, or an observation? Okay. Because I'm actually going to just continue reading the sutras, and if someone wants to ask a question, you just stop me. But what I feel is they flow together from this point, and we'll comment as we get into some that, and I won't read all of them, but several. Attachment is that which dwells on pleasure. So look within the person, within the mind stuff, and you'll see there's an aspect within what I'm experiencing that dwells on pleasure. And aversion is that which dwells on pain. This is said to be ragadvesha. And there's a clinging to life, which is an obstacle as well. But it's not clinging to real life, you see. It's clinging to, here's what it really is. We've had so many of these. We've been together so many times. We've had so many of these experiences of what we call birth and death and all the stuff in between. So many, so many, so many. I know that each one of you have had some feeling like, certainly we've been together before, and it's true. How many times? God knows. So many times, so many times, so many times. At some point I realized, and these words came, I think, from Guru inside. And the words were, I am tired of dying. But until we get really tired of dying, and tired enough to want to investigate the cause of death, which is just mental. Death is an idea, it's not a reality. Then we cling to life. So the clinging to life is clinging to, because death is so painful. It's trying to avoid that. So it's a clinging to the physical life. That's also seen as an obstacle. Now, these obstacles exist within the personal mind. And they exist, and they're called samskaras. Samskara is both a memory of a thing as well as the judgment about the thing. So I can see this form of light on the phone, and the memory of this particular form of light and identification of it as Gayatri is a memory. But then all of the stuff that arises that's in the vritti about like, dislike, this idea, that idea, pleasurable, oh, I love being with you, and oh my God, why did you say that? Because I can't love you anymore. All that stuff. This vritti land, this is all within the samskaras. And the samskaras they exist within the mind, both subtle and gross. In the subtle, they make up what we call the subconscious mind. So when you see the person, Saraswati, and you see an image on the computer screen that your mind calls Trump. And then all this stuff comes up, all this vritti land stuff. And so no peace now, because all the vritti land, I'm in vritti land. And all of that is an aspect of samskara. How did it get there? It got there through prior choices. It existed in the subconscious mind, so it's subtle. But then the anger, when it arises, is the gross form of it. I'm going to continue. And this, by the way, is karma. This is where karma comes from. Karma is the fructification of these samskaras. And they bear fruit as pleasure or pain. In other words, when I experience something that within the mind, samskara, is an idea of it as pleasurable, I experience pleasure. But the pleasure doesn't exist in the thing. The pleasure only exists in the mind. Does that make sense? And it will invariably cease to be pleasurable, and then I call it pain. So that which is pleasant becomes painful, that which is painful becomes pleasant, but the cycle continues. That's the karmic wheel, or the wheel of samsara. 15. To the one who discriminates. All this stuff, all is as it were painful, because everything brings pain. This is the question about the croissant, the bakery, what to do about it. Finally, you say, oh my God, all of this is resulting in pain. And what? I'm going to stop it. At some point I wanted to kill myself. And the reason I wanted to kill myself was just because I wanted to stop this. And through grace, I discovered a better way. Because killing oneself in the physical sense doesn't do it. But killing the cycle does. Does that make sense? Stopping the cycle. In other words, stopping myself from craving and from aversion. Ending the identification with the little I. That's what stops it. And so when we see, oh my God, everything is like this. It starts as a seed, right? I was doing perfectly fine, but then I saw that activity in that building. Did that activity and where did that activity in the building result? Well, it ended up in pain, right? Because they closed. I had the addiction by that point. I had the $600 a month habit. And now something has to change, or I just suffer with it. And all along the way, I was suffering. It wasn't really pleasant. Does that make sense? It wasn't. I thought it was pleasant, but that was just an idea that it was pleasant. Because something in this mind enjoyed that experience with the chemicals, but that's all mind stuff too. And as a result of giving myself to that experience, then I brought pain on myself. Does that resonate?
Om.
So I said, stop it. Now, where is all this cycle happening? It's only happening in the mind. And so this became the motivation for yoga. Does that resonate? Which is, this is what I have to be free of. It's not the coffee that I have to be free of, because when I'm addicted to coffee, fine. If I don't deal with the real addiction, the real process, what's happening, then I stop coffee and I pick up chai. And then I stop chai and I pick up cocaine, and I stop cocaine and I pick up anger, and I stop anger and I pick alcohol somewhere along the way, right? I just moved from one substance to another. How many births? Oh my God, too many. And so the discriminating all is, as it were, painful, because everything, what is this? The vritti life brings pain, either as consequence or in anticipation of the loss of happiness, or as a fresh cravings arise from impressions of happiness, and also because the gunas counteract each other. So, okay, I'm going to fast forward a little bit because there's discussion of gunas. The seer, the eye, is intelligence only, and though pure, sees through the coloring of the intellect. So what's happened is that the covering or coloring, all these samskaras, all of these impressions, all this stuff that I've taken on as me to myself, I'm seeing through that. I'm not seeing clearly. I'm seeing through all these colors. And it's resulting in a junction where I lose myself to this or to that. This is and what's the cause? That's number 24. Ignorance is its cause. That's where you ask the question, Gayatri, beautiful question. Is it desire? No, it's not desire, it's ignorance. If you know who you are, then your desire could be for nothing other than the capital S self, you see. And you can have a desire like Peace Pilgrim did, that we're all at peace. And that's a beautiful desire. And the fact is, you'll be able to accept the state, and work for peace. And it will be a desire, but for which self? The capital S self. May all know peace, may all be happy. So the issue is not desire, the issue is only ignorance. Does that make sense? And then we continue, there being an absence of that, there's an absence of junction. This is the destruction of ignorance. And this is the independence of the seer. So that's what Patanjali is establishing. When there's an absence of ignorance, there's an absence of the bhoga, the coming into union with individual objects or individual persons or individual experiences or any of this. Thus, the destruction of ignorance is the freedom or moksha or the independence of the seer, of the eye. So this is the goal of yoga. I want to stop there just for a moment to let it resonate. And now we're going to come to Ashtanga, which we all think is yoga. The means of destruction of ignorance, how can I end this ignorance, is unbroken practice of discrimination. This is where Yogananda steps in and says, the way to God is through continuous practice of his presence every moment, along with deep meditation. So destruction of ignorance is unbroken practice of discrimination at every level. What's beneficial? What's the truth? What's the obstacle? What are beneficial thoughts? What are non-beneficial thoughts? Through the practice of the different parts of yoga, the impurities are destroyed and knowledge is kindled, leading up to discrimination. Ultimate knowledge is the knowledge of the self, capital S self. It's known in samadhi. It's not the intellectual knowledge, although right knowledge, which is knowledge existing in intellect, is helpful. It's helpful. So now the 8 limbs are introduced. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi are the 8 limbs of yoga. And I'll continue to step through. Yama is ahimsa, asteya, satya, brahmacharya, aparigraha, non-killing or non-harming, truthfulness, non-stealing, continence, non-receiving of gifts. This is the most important practice of yoga. People think sitting for meditation is the most important. The practice of the yamas are the most important. Om, yes, sir.
Swami, non-receiving of gifts. What is this? This is the one that I've been meditating on, of what that means, of non-receiving of gifts, of not receiving anything from anybody.
What it relates to is the vritti and the destruction of the vritti.
Mm.
As long as there is a separate person who has the power to provide or take away happiness, then you're living in vritti land.
Um,
Do you see how it connects?
mm. Yes.
Okay. Okay,
Um,
it's like that. It ultimately does not mean not to accept the gift. It means to see it for what it is, which is a movement of energy through the energy field. And
So
and what we're to give in return, which in the world is we're to give something back, that's a process that needs to be broken. And whatever we have to give, we're to give to the absolute regardless.
mm.
And that gift should not be related to whether something is given to us or not, or who gives it and who doesn't.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. It's there. It's there. It's there. So we'll just we'll read a little bit more, and then but to focus on yama and niyama. Niyama is this: internal and external purification, or saucha; contentment, or santosha; tapasya, which is austerity; swadhyaya, study; and then ishvara pranadhana, or worship of God, or the self-surrender to God. And then this concept, which is a beautiful summary of the most important practice that we're working with in terms of practices. When thoughts obstructive to yoga arise, that is, when thoughts that bring you into vritti or bhoga arise, contrary thoughts should be employed. That's positive thinking. The whole book, Thought Power, from Swami Sivananda, is focused on this. And it's the best study I know of in terms of how to do this. The practice itself in Sanskrit is called pratipaksha bhavana. So I'll give you a preview. A thought arises: I want a croissant, or I want a cookie. That's a samskara. And what's likely to happen when that arises is, in vritti land, the world will all of a sudden become about getting that croissant or cookie. And we'll experience it in the mind, and the salivation will happen in the belly, and all this stuff will happen. So what's the practice? Bring an opposite thought. It could be as simple as, no, I don't. And that practice is the great practice of yoga called pratipaksha bhavana. And this is dealing with the obstructions, or what goes to vrittis. The obstructions of yoga are killing, falsehood, and so forth, whether committed, caused, or proved, either through avarice, anger, or ignorance, whether slight, middling, or great. They result in infinite ignorance and misery. And this, pratipaksha bhavana, is the method of thinking the contrary, which is when that thought arises, this idea, I want, that I that's asserting is not the real I. Do you hear that? That's just the voice in the head, I. That's the one I don't want to listen to. That's the one that results in pain. And so when it says, I want, then we bring an opposite thought. No, I don't. Could be a good one. An even better one, Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. A good one, I am that. A good one, Aham Brahmasmi, I am that, which I seek. Practical one, no, I want to take a breath instead. No, I want to walk through the park instead. No, I want to pick up a book from Swami Vivekananda instead. Because that will meet the mind on its level, at its level. Or maybe, no, I don't want that. I want, what is it that I don't like that's good for me? I want a piece of broccoli right now. So there are lots of ways to work with it. But ultimately, it's the breaking of the cycle, the terrible cycle within the mind. Okay, I'm just going to read. I'm checking the time. We're close, but we're going to get there. If we have 10 more minutes. When the yogi is established in non-killing, these are the yamas, all enmities and others cease in his presence. Now, can I share something with you? Absolute truth. When you stop disliking others, everyone else stops disliking you. Honest to God, it's true. When you stop thinking ill of others, others stop thinking ill of you. Amma says it this way. Amma says, when you pray for all within the universe, the entire universe prays for you. She says it in a positive way. And so that's ahimsa. By being established in truthfulness, the yogi gets the power of attaining for himself and others the fruits of work without the work. When the mind becomes truthful, there's a change that occurs, which is whatever is needed comes without working for it. Oh my God, this one's a crazy one, but it works. You may have a thought. I'll give you one of mine. You know, a new computer would be nice because I would be able to keep up with the communications with the Sangha better. And you know what happened? Without working for it, it came. You know what? It would be great if the car could keep running, because then I would be able to do my duties. And you know what? Okay. Next, by being established in non-stealing, the yogi obtains all wealth. That sounds like Jesus Christ, doesn't it? By being established in continence, the yogi gains energy. That's brahmacharya. When the yogi is established in non-receiving, he gets the memory of past life. What that means is, without the affiliation with other and otherness, then more clarity is coming into the mind. When he's established in internal and external cleanliness, saucha, there arises in him non-interest in the physical stuff. What does that mean? You know, whenever we want someone for how they look or what they say, whether it's what we think are sexual appetites, they're not. It's not that. It's not really natural. lust is not actually natural. It's not, we humans justify lust by looking at the animals and say, look, they do it, so why not us? It's not that. It's born of delusion, of course, and it propagates delusion. And so with Saucha, we lose interest in seeing others based on a body. We lose interest in the bodies. I mean, this body, it's fine. That body, it's fine, but they're temples. Okay, there also arise purification of the sattva, cheerfulness of mind, concentration, conquest of the organs, and fitness for the realization of self. From contentment, and that's arising from Saucha. From contentment comes superlative happiness. I just shared something on Facebook, and it's like this. Santosha is translated as contentment, but santosha is really also, you can consider it as a positive acceptance, grateful acceptance. You know, we think what happened to us, this is the vritti land. What happened to me, it might take away my happiness. And oh my God, you know, and I can't stand that. What happened to me is an opportunity. You see the complete difference between the two ways of relating. It's an opportunity, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. You know, I don't understand the opportunity. I don't know why it happened, but I'm sure it happened for a good reason. And I'm sure that if I can be present and you know, stay in the present now and serve the Lord, then what I need to know, it'll come. That's santosha. That's really santosha. And you know what the practice of active acceptance does is it takes your power back. Your power that you gave to someone else, your power to achieve and to reach the happiness of self, we keep giving to someone else. And there's no other to give it to. But we keep giving it. And that's the negative. When there's a problem and this happened and that happened and you did this and you did that. Santosha is the taking back of the natural power, because whatever we accept loses power over us. Does that resonate? Whatever we truly accept has no power over us anymore, because we've said it's fine. And if we know, we say, dear Lord, do your worst, it's fine, because I know that you love me and I know that it's an opportunity. So I get it. I just don't understand it. But that's okay. I don't have to. You understand it. I'm sure you do. And therefore, what happens, no power over me any longer. And so my power, the power of self, I've collected it all. And this is direct path to freedom. Santosha is direct path to freedom. And then, through the sacrificing of all to Ishvara, and what I've just talked about is really this, it's Ishvara Pranadhana, where, dear Lord, you're the doer of all. I'm not doing anything here. And not only that, you're the lover of all and the lover of me. I am thine, all is thine. I don't want or need for anything other than thee. All I want is thee. All I want is to serve thee. I don't want to be separate from you. And what is that? That leads to samadhi. It's direct samadhi. Because why? Because at some point, there's nothing but God here. And that's the truth. So that's really the practice. Those yama and niyama are really the practice of asana. The rest are, the practice of yoga, the rest are aids or fruit. And I'll step through quickly. Posture, asana. Here's all that's said in Raja Yoga Sutras about asana. Posture is that which is firm and pleasant. Through the lessening of the natural tendency for activity caused by identification with the body, and through meditation on the infinite, posture becomes firm and pleasant. So there's a tendency that we're experiencing to get something, to do something, And you see it when we sit, the jitteriness, the movement of the eyes, all of this is related to this. Through the lessening of this tendency and through meditation, through really contemplation of the infinite, the posture becomes firm and pleasant. And that's really what asana means. All the asanas, the practice of hatha yoga, it's related, but asana is really about this. That's why people ask me still today, don't you have an asana practice? And I sit and I say, yes, this is it. And people laugh. And I say, this is asana practice. But I did the same. Hatha yoga helps to stabilize. Okay, we close. Posture being conquered, the dualities not obstruct. So asana is actually the fruit of all of this. Having a firm and pleasant posture is a fruit, but that's also the next step, next anga. And then pranayama, control the motion of exhalation and inhalation follows after this. It's not the breathing, it's the control of the energies involved in breathing in the body. So pranayama is not breathing, the lungs do that. Pranayama is using the mind to concentrate and focus on the power mechanisms, the muscles, and bring forth the energy to move the lungs. That's pranayama. It's not breathing. The lungs do that. It's the conscious control of the muscles and the energies involved. That's pranayama. And so it's done in coordination with breathing, but it's the intentional, conscious act underlying the movement of the breath in and out. Related to this is the restraining of the prana. The restraining means the control of the prana. So we're learning to control the prana. Now, it's not actually the mind controlling the prana, it's the eye. But we're utilizing the mind as an instrument to control the prana. By that, the covering of the light of the chitta is attenuated, made less. By that, by the control of the prana, pranayama, the obstructions, that which is covering the light is attenuated. And the mind becomes fit for dharana. This is 53. Dharana is concentration. So you see what we've covered here in 1 and 2 is all about the preparation for dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Pratyahara, or the drawing in of the organs, drawing them back from the sense objects. And that practice of pratyahara requires first recognizing, I don't want to go there. What do you do if you don't want to go there? I draw back. And that's pratyahara, that's the practice. And thence arises supreme control of the organs. And then I'm just going to read 4 more sutras and we're done, and a few more moments for questions, and then we can close. Dharana is the holding of the mind to, by the way, now we've closed the second book. We've actually closed the portion on practices. Of the 8 limbs, Ashtanga, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, those are the practices. Chapter 3 is the chapter on accomplishments. The accomplishment is concentration of mind, because now the mind is fit for concentration. Now it's been tenderized. Now it's been made compliant. And so now when you sit in that comfortable pose, you can bring the mind to concentration because you've developed power over the mind, over the individual mind. So dharana is the holding of the mind to some particular object. You can say to it, up, stay, and it stays. You can say to it, God, stay, and it stays. And when it stays for a while, when that dhyana gives up all forms, an unbroken flow of knowledge about that object is dhyana. And then what is samadhi? When that, i.e. dhyana, gives up all forms and reveals only the meaning, it is samadhi. Okay, we close. And we can take a few minutes if anyone has any other questions or comments before we pray together. Anyone?
Thank you. I'm glad we're on mute because I was laughing half the time with some of the things because it was resonating so much. But I was looking for answers, and like you said, when you just put that out there of just say, I'd like to know about this, or if this is, if this is true or whatnot, and everything that I think I was searching for in the last couple of days was revealed to me today. So,
Oh, that's the role of questions. Oh. Okay, anyone else, a question or comment?
Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah
Swamiji.
Shivaya, Kirama.
Ooh, so I just want to comment how much it is so beautiful. These scriptures are like logical steps from the beginning, scientific steps from the beginning that just kind of leads into further opening.
Yes.
Just so beautiful.
Yes, indeed.
Thank
Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev. Ishvara. Ishvara, that sutra about Ishvara being the teacher. And of course, our big challenge is that we all have within this mind some individualized idea of Ishvara, and that idea has relegated the real Ishvara to a trash bin. And so really the modern practice of yoga is accomplishing something, which is it's starting to open up to that which is higher. And that's where the real practice of yoga can begin. So yeah, it's here. Any other questions or comments? Saraswati, are you still with us, dear?
I see that she is, although she just turned her video off. And Carrie also joined.
Okay, Carrie. Welcome, dear. Okay, we should Gayatri, any comment or anything in closing?
No, just thank you. What a wonderful offering. And I like taking this forward, that when things feel difficult, here is the opportunity for constant practice and right patient.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
I wanted to say thank you also, Swami, and I'm sure Michael does too.
Okay, I pray it's beneficial. We covered a lot of ground, but God willing, the parts that wanted to stick are sticking. What I pray for this, and Gayatri, thank you for requesting it. And we said essence. What I pray for is that it can serve as something of an introduction and inspiration to dive deeper into the into Shastra. and in particular Raja Yoga. There's so much more here in Raja Yoga than it's given credit for in our common parlance. So, okay. So whoever would like, we can mute, but whoever can join in for the Mahamrityunjaya, the Om Triambakam mantra, please join. And thank you all for participation, and thank you for, my God, thank you for your service. Thank you for your interest in growth, in rising up, in transformation, in God, however we say it. Thank you so much. God bless you. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all be happy and free, and may you achieve in this birth only, complete success, complete self-realization, complete experience of grace and freedom from suffering. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rokameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyama Amritata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rokameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyama Amritata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rokameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyama Amritata. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Ambalo Sakar Sivananda Maharaj Ki Jai, for all the saints and sages of all the traditions. Jai. God bless us, everyone. Om Shanti.